chers amis. Je voulais d'abord excuser Dominique Versini, qui est maire adjointe en charge d'une très très grande délégation sociale, de n'avoir pu participer. Vous savez qu'elle a une actualité extrêmement importante. Elle était elle-même partie voir en Allemagne comment s'organise l'accueil des réfugiés, parce que voilà, nous avons beaucoup de choses à apprendre aussi sur les autres collectivités et les autres pays. Et moi-même, j'aurais bien voulu participer beaucoup plus à vos travaux avec des collègues et des collaborateurs, mais il se trouve qu'en même temps, j'avais pris des engagements auprès de European Social Network, l'association européenne, justement des services sociaux européens, et j'intervenais dans 2 conférences, dont une sur l'apport des nouvelles technologies dans le domaine social. Un sujet extrêmement intéressant. Et je sais d'ailleurs que vous l'avez traité à travers la question du numérique. Voilà. Donc, vraiment désolé, j'arrive à l'instant et je ne pouvais pas, en tout cas, ne pas venir et vous dire, en tout cas, un mot de bienvenue. J'espère, en tout cas, que vous appréciez Paris. On sait que c'est toujours intéressant de venir. Il y a beaucoup de choses. C'est une ville extrêmement dynamique, mais c'est aussi une ville qui a un certain nombre de facettes qui sont des facettes et des disparités extrêmement différentes selon les endroits où vous allez. Et peut-être qu'un jour, on aura l'occasion de vous présenter un petit peu plus dans le détail ce qu'est Paris dans son volet social, mais ce n'est pas l'objet aujourd'hui. Voilà, donc j'ai vu et j'ai parcouru l'ensemble de votre programme et je me suis retrouvé dans pratiquement tous les thèmes parce que ce sont des thèmes que nous traitons réellement au quotidien sur Paris. Il n'y en a pas un qui ne me soit complètement étranger. Donc ça peut donner des idées aussi sur la manière dont effectivement on peut prolonger aussi des conférences de ce type parce que ces sujets sont d'actualité, mais ils sont d'actualité sur l'ensemble du territoire français. Je représente aussi l'Association nationale des directeurs d'action sociale, l'association dans laquelle je suis très impliqué. Ce sont des sujets que nous partageons régulièrement. Nous avons tous à apprendre les uns des autres, même si les cultures, les référentiels, les modes de construction de l'action sociale diffèrent. Et autant dans ce que j'ai pu en voir et en lire de vos travaux, des sujets et de ce que nous avons pu évoquer à ESN, à Malte, avec John Halloran, avec 36 pays, on voit qu'on a des différences majeures, mais qui en même temps font que nous avons tous à apprendre des uns des autres. Et sans doute, notre modèle français, dans ce domaine-là, a des choses à apprendre parce qu'il est, par certains aspects, plutôt rigide. C'est une construction vraiment historique qui date de plusieurs décennies. Et je pense qu'aujourd'hui, certains pays peuvent nous apporter, en tout cas, des choses extrêmement variées dans les modes de construction, justement, à la fois de nos propres savoirs et de la création. Alors, Paris soutient beaucoup l'initiative, la recherche, la start-up. On ouvre encore ce soir un lieu qui est un magnifique Fab Lab, justement, où ça va être une espèce de ruche supplémentaire sur Paris, où il y aura vraiment beaucoup de fabrication, beaucoup de créativité, beaucoup d'innovation. Et puis, il faut voir aussi que Paris est très très impliqué, c'est une demande de la maire Anne Hidalgo, réellement qu'on réforme aussi un peu nos organisations et nos administrations. C'est-à-dire qu'on ne le fait pas parce qu'il faut le faire, on le fait parce qu'elle demande à ce que ce soit, à chaque fois qu'on a la possibilité de revoir un peu nos organisations, nos services aujourd'hui, on puisse le faire, pour s'interroger. Ça ne veut pas dire qu'on aboutira, mais au moins qu'on se questionne. C'est un vrai leitmotiv aujourd'hui que de questionner l'ensemble de nos organisations. Alors, on mesure effectivement tous les jours à Paris l'importance d'avancer sur 2 thèmes qui vous sont chers ici, qui est la recherche et la formation. J'y reviendrai tout à l'heure. Alors, je voudrais quand même vous dire qu'on est pleinement d'actualité sur... Il y a une vraie question autour de la reconnaissance du travail social. Et pour vous dire quand même qu'on a mené une très grande réforme à Paris qui s'appelle le nouveau Paris solidaire. C'est une réforme à la fois d'organisation, mais aussi pour redonner du sens au travail que nous faisons, avec notamment la création d'équipes d'ingénierie sur le territoire, au plus près du territoire, avec des regroupements de services extrêmement importants. Et ça joue parfois à Paris, plus de 500 agents peuvent basculer d'une direction à une autre direction. Et on a aussi créé à travers cette réforme, un plus fort ancrage avec les mairies d'arrondissement. Vous savez qu'il y a 20 mairies d'arrondissement, de manière à impliquer un peu plus sur l'action sociale et la stratégie d'action sociale les maires d'arrondissement, parce qu'ils ont des équipes et ils ont le premier contact avec l'ensemble des citoyens. Et c'est sans doute passer d'un système de top-down en système de construction de l'action sociale en bottom-up, comme on dit, partant du terrain. C'est vraiment quelque chose qu'on essaye d'inventer aujourd'hui et qui est tout à fait nouveau. Et que la ville reconnaisse à travers un accord ce matin, vous voyez, il y a 2 heures, avec les organisations syndicales, la reconnaissance du travail social et des professionnels à travers des réévaluations indemnitaires, mais qui permettent de rattraper, ça a été dit, en tout cas par les élus, comme étant une vraie reconnaissance de toute cette action sociale, comme étant extrêmement importante dans l'inclusion dans une ville qui va bien et qui doit bien aller. Voilà, l'action sociale participe au bien-être de la population et c'est un mot extrêmement fort et c'est porté par l'ensemble de l'exécutif. Voilà. Alors, tout n'est pas rose aujourd'hui, il faut quand même le savoir, et Paris, en tant que capitale, est une collectivité qui est exposée à des évolutions extrêmement importantes. Des évolutions de public, même si nous ne sommes pas dans des arrivées de personnes réfugiées en nombre aussi important que l'Allemagne ou d'autres pays, Paris capte beaucoup de flux de réfugiés aujourd'hui et nous sommes, enfin de demandes en tout cas de statut, de personnes qui souhaitent le statut. Et donc on a à gérer des flux extrêmement importants avec des enchevêtrements un peu de compétences entre l'État et nous, mais c'est qui fait que voilà, c'est assez difficile à construire, mais en même temps, on y arrive. On a créé un dispositif de premier accueil et on a créé aussi des centres d'accueil de migrants de manière à pouvoir accueillir ces personnes-là avec plus de dignité. La question est aussi après de leur intégration et donc comment on mobilise aussi le travail social pour l'insertion et l'intégration des personnes réfugiées. On a aussi beaucoup de jeunes qui sont arrivés, qui arrivent par l'Italie, par des tas d'autres pays, qui arrivent directement aussi par l'avion. Il y a des jeunes qui sont en demande, en tout cas, d'une assistance, des jeunes mineurs étrangers, et on a des flux qui ont été multipliés par 4, par 5, ce qui questionne un peu nos propres organisations aujourd'hui. Évidemment, on a la chance à Paris d'avoir, pas à Paris, mais au niveau national, d'avoir organisé un système de répartition qui fait qu'on fait porter l'effort sur l'ensemble des collectivités françaises, ce qui est quand même un bel effort. Sur la question des publics, on a aussi une précarité persistante, je dirais, des gens qui occupent le domaine public, qui sont à la rue. Ça peut être des familles, mais c'est aussi des personnes seules, et ça nous préoccupe réellement au niveau du travail social sur ce que nous pouvons et devons faire, sachant qu'on est bien à Paris en tout cas, dans une optique d'aider ces personnes, de venir en aide et de ne pas gérer simplement des questions comme si c'était des questions d'espace public. On a aussi quand même l'émergence de problématiques qui sont de plus en plus complexes sur le terrain et qui, là aussi, réinterrogent quand même nos capacités en termes de travail social, parce que très souvent, c'est lié à la santé et comment se parlent les professionnels du social avec les professionnels de la santé, notamment de la santé mentale, où nous sommes quand même sur un gros déficit national et en tout cas sur Paris, c'est évident. Donc là, il y a vraiment énormément de coordination à faire, c'est vraiment des nouvelles choses à inventer. Et puis on a toujours, de manière persistante en France et à Paris particulièrement, des jeunes en décrochage scolaire et c'est aussi extrêmement préoccupant. On a un environnement aussi qui change énormément et qui vient percuter complètement le travail social. D'abord, il y a des contraintes très fortes qui pèsent sur la dépense publique et donc sur les moyens qui sont accordés aux collectivités, mais aussi par incidence aux services sociaux, d'ailleurs qu'ils soient publics ou qu'ils soient privés, puisqu'ils sont majoritairement financés par le secteur public. Donc, et même d'ailleurs le secteur privé, puisqu'il est très souvent dépendant de la manière dont on peut solvabiliser les personnes pour être accueillies. Donc cet aspect des contraintes pèse beaucoup parce qu'elle exige des services sociaux un effort de transparence, de lisibilité, et que nous fassions aussi la démonstration de notre performance. Une offre, dans l'environnement qui change, il y a aussi une offre et des équilibres aussi entre le secteur lucratif et le secteur non lucratif, qui est aussi un peu préoccupant. Pas préoccupant sur la qualité forcément des prestations, mais préoccupant sur qui peut avoir accès à l'ensemble de ces services-là. Et nous considérons que nous avons un rôle de régulation pour permettre que la population puisse avoir le choix entre des services lucratifs et non lucratifs, ce qui n'est pas évident, notamment dans le service d'aide à domicile pour les personnes âgées. On voit la disparition des services classiques, traditionnels, associatifs, au profit d'une explosion des services lucratifs qui fixent leurs tarifs et qui font un peu ce qu'ils veulent aussi sur le terrain. Et ça crée aussi une concurrence très forte aujourd'hui entre un secteur, entre plusieurs acteurs, qui peut être un peu vertueux pour essayer de nous pousser un peu au changement, mais qui ne l'est pas toujours. Un troisième aspect de cet environnement qui change, c'est le tout numérique. Alors, y aller, pas y aller, c'est un grand débat à Malte avec ESN. On voit des pays qui ont fait vraiment, qui sont allés dans le tout numérique et qui ne se posent pas énormément de questions éthiques sur la circulation des informations, sur le fait que plusieurs collectivités différentes ou statuts différents puissent avoir accès à une base de données, qui ont par là même l'avantage de travailler plus dans le préventif parce qu'ils peuvent faire de l'exploitation des big data, par exemple. Nous, on n'en est pas là en France, et par contre, on en est à passer de l'informatique, un peu de gestion, au numérique comme étant un outil d'accessibilité pour les populations, de meilleur accès aux droits. C'est beaucoup d'enjeux, beaucoup de débats, avec des débats éthiques, déontologiques, tout à fait nécessaires derrière ça. Il ne faut pas pour autant que ça nous prive d'avancer vers ce qui est des outils aujourd'hui dont la population s'empare plus vite que nos propres services. Je vous donne simplement, là aujourd'hui, en ce moment, mes collègues sont en train de faire un bilan de la stratégie d'inclusion numérique que nous avons lancée avec Dominique Versini. Et c'est vrai que le secteur social a récupéré la compétence sur l'inclusion numérique, comme l'élu du secteur social l'a récupéré, parce que nous voulons avoir une attention particulière pour les personnes les plus vulnérables. Mais nous sommes qu'au-devant des surprises, puisque toutes les enquêtes que nous avons faites et les croisements de données que nous avons pu faire aujourd'hui et les sondages auprès des populations montrent que la population est beaucoup plus numérisée que ne le sont nos propres services. Et ça va jusqu'à 83% des personnes très vulnérables qui peuvent bénéficier à un moment donné du numérique, en tout cas, et qui l'utilisent assez régulièrement, ce qui est une vraie surprise pour nous-mêmes. Donc, en tout cas, il y a une vraie question autour du numérique, et c'est sans doute une question aussi pour les organismes de formation à terme, parce que ça ne peut pas... Voilà, je pense qu'il faudra qu'on n'en reste pas là et qu'on avance. Il y a aussi un désir de citoyenneté extrêmement fort qui s'exprime dans un vaste mouvement de participation des citoyens à la construction des réponses, y compris des réponses sociales. Et ça nous percute complètement, c'est-à-dire qu'aujourd'hui, comment on travaille et comment nos professionnels du social sont en capacité de discuter avec des citoyens dans la construction d'une offre sociale. Et ça, c'est vraiment tout à fait nouveau. Tous nos schémas médico-sociaux que nous avons créés cette année, les grands plans, etc., ont appelé la contribution. Les assises de la santé, par exemple, ont appelé des contributions dans tous les arrondissements de la population. Ça a fait apparaître des tas de besoins qui ne sont pas forcément ceux qu'on aurait pensés pour l'usager. Et tout ça, c'est extrêmement intéressant, mais nos professionnels sont parfois un peu décontenancés quand il s'agit de demander à des usagers de s'exprimer et à des citoyens de dire ce qu'il en est. Alors, je vous fais simplement une petite aparté, mais nous faisons à la mi-octobre des grandes journées citoyennes autour du social. Nous allons inviter par les maires d'arrondissement l'ensemble des citoyens à redécouvrir l'action sociale sur les territoires par des parcours qui seront guidés par les maires d'arrondissement directement. C'est une façon de passer un signal extrêmement fort sur le fait qu'aujourd'hui, il faut compter avec les usagers. Et puis, ne serait-ce qu'il y a un désir extrêmement fort de la population de s'engager au sens social. Quand on a eu vraiment la crise des réfugiés de manière extrêmement violente qui est arrivée, où on ne savait pas comment faire pour accueillir l'ensemble des populations, il y a une plateforme qui a été créée qui s'appelait la plateforme Je m'engage, et on a eu là aussi énormément de propositions, d'aides, de volonté de la part de la population de participer, de contribuer. La difficulté, c'est qu'on ne savait pas toujours faire le lien entre la demande d'un côté et le besoin de l'autre, mais ça s'est pas mal organisé. Et puis un désir aussi très fort des élus d'impliquer les citoyens aussi dans cette action-là. La maire, en tout cas Anne Hidalgo et Dominique Versini le portent vraiment. C'est comment on peut aujourd'hui, partant du principe que nous ne pourrons pas tout faire dans le modèle social tel qu'il est établi, comment on peut plus mobiliser la société civile et quelles sont les ressources dont elle dispose qui peuvent aussi venir à contribution. C'est-à-dire que le travail social n'a pas le monopole aujourd'hui de l'action. Il y a véritablement aussi une autre façon qu'il faut travailler, qui est une application plus forte. Aller rechercher aussi toute cette ressource disponible qui ne demande qu'à s'exprimer. Alors la formation et la recherche ne peuvent pas ignorer toutes ces évolutions. Il y a un enjeu majeur que nos professionnels soient bien en phase avec ses besoins et les habitants et leurs aspirations. Sinon, à un moment donné, il y aura un décrochage et les habitants vont re-questionner la dépense publique et notamment la dépense sociale. Donc il y a un vrai enjeu de lisibilité de les associer. Et nous pensons qu'en tout cas, les faire participer, c'est déjà une façon de leur donner de la lisibilité. C'est la notion de faire avec. Alors, pour vous dire, sur Paris, on essaie de faire beaucoup de choses. On passe, je vais aller quand même assez rapidement. On ne part pas de rien, quoi. L'action sociale à Paris, il faut juste se représenter que c'est 35% du budget de la collectivité. Mais c'est une collectivité à Paris qui a l'avantage de regrouper à la fois le département et la commune. Donc en fait, c'est une collectivité unique, et son statut d'ailleurs change prochainement. C'est une collectivité. Au niveau social, nous sommes 11 000 professionnels à travailler. Et je ne compte que les professionnels publics de l'action sociale à Paris. 11 000 professionnels. C'est tout champ confondu, à peu près dans tous les domaines, y compris de la santé. Nous allons au-delà de nos compétences parce que nous pensons que pour être pertinent, il faut s'investir dans différents sujets et différents domaines. La santé n'est pas une obligation en matière de compétences, mais nous avons historiquement, en tout cas, un certain nombre de centres de santé et nous avons des compétences déléguées de l'État sur la santé scolaire, par exemple. Et puis, je l'ai dit, il y a des grands schémas de programmation, donc c'est quand même les outils que nous avons aujourd'hui qui, dans cette première partie de mandat, de 2014 à aujourd'hui, ont tous été validés et tous validés à l'unanimité de l'ensemble des élus, qu'ils soient de l'opposition ou pas, à la ville de Paris. Donc c'est vous dire qu'à un moment donné, il peut y avoir consensus autour de schémas de programmation, d'actions, de politiques publiques qui ont du sens, en tout cas pour la population et pour les élus. Alors mais Paris, c'est beaucoup de moyens, c'est aussi un grand mouvement très fort de questionnement de nos propres organisations. Je voudrais simplement vous le dire, c'est quelque chose qui frappe parfois, mais j'ai un tiers de l'ensemble de l'effectif de Paris qui a été impliqué à un moment donné dans un projet de service ou une réforme, en l'espace de 2 ans. D'accord ? On a fait plus d'une centaine de réunions avec les organisations syndicales pour se mettre d'accord. Moi, je rencontre les professionnels très régulièrement. J'ai 2 petites matinées qui sont consacrées à la rencontre par semaine, 2 professionnels en direct. On a créé les matinées des savoirs sociaux pour essayer de faire en sorte que des professionnels puissent échanger, capter les enjeux, comprendre le pourquoi on avance dans certains sens. On a créé aussi un projet qui est un projet bottom-up, comme on dit, qui s'appelle DASES 360. DASES, c'est le nom de la direction, qui permet à des professionnels qui n'ont pas la possibilité de s'exprimer sur des envies, des projets, des irritants, des choses qu'ils veulent faire progresser, de venir le faire dans le cadre de groupes projets en travaillant avec d'autres. Voilà, on en est à 150 professionnels investis, on va passer à 400 à l'automne. Voilà, ce sont des initiatives de ce type-là, en tout cas, qui régénèrent, réinventent un peu le travail social et les postures. Alors, tout n'est pas forcément réussi, mais en tout cas, on essaye aussi d'entraîner le mouvement. Je pense qu'il faut que tout le monde se sente impliqué, se sente à un moment donné. Ça ne peut pas être simplement les cadres sup qui managent. Il faut réellement que ces aspects de compréhension et de sens soient partagés avec le plus grand nombre des professionnels. La difficulté, c'est comment on rend accessible cette connaissance-là aux professionnels. Alors, pour vous dire, c'est comme une vaste aussi entreprise d'innovation. Moi, j'ai recruté des compétences en innovation pour pouvoir... j'ai recruté des compétences en innovation auprès de moi, qui impulse, qui insuffle, qui questionne un peu l'ensemble des fonctionnements. Et ça fait aussi partie... On a recruté des compétences sur les territoires en matière d'ingénierie territoriale. Je ne sais pas comment ça se traduit, mais ça me paraît aussi extrêmement important. Ce sont des nouvelles compétences qui participent largement au travail social. Et puis, c'est aussi une vaste entreprise de recherche-action. Vous êtes ici à Paris Descartes. Nous contribuons avec notre cellule d'expertise et d'innovation à des tas de travaux avec Paris Descartes ici, avec des étudiants de master qui s'impliquent. On a des CIFRE aussi, qui sont des chercheurs en études, qui travaillent sur les familles roms, qui travaillent sur l'inclusion, sur la radicalisation, que des sujets que vous aviez dans vos carnets et dans vos tablettes. Voilà. Voilà, donc je voulais peut-être finir pour dire qu'il ne peut pas y avoir... vous comprenez que les sujets qui sont les nôtres au niveau de l'action, et je vous disais qu'on a cette chance en tout cas de pouvoir un peu sortir la tête du guidon, du terrain assez régulièrement pour se brancher sur des objectifs de recherche, d'études, de formation. Toutes les collectivités n'ont pas toujours les compétences que Paris peut avoir pour le faire, mais en tout cas, les collègues des autres départements le disent souvent, ils sont très motivés pour tout ça, même s'ils n'en ont pas forcément les moyens. Donc c'est extrêmement important de participer à des temps de recherche, des temps d'échange sur les réalités qui peuvent être extrêmement différentes. Voilà. Et il ne peut pas y avoir d'un côté l'action, il ne peut pas y avoir la recherche et le social. Moi, c'est ce que j'appelle en tout cas le cluster social. J'en ai parlé déjà avec des responsables d'organismes de formation sur Paris. Je pense qu'il faut qu'on arrive à bien faire communiquer ceux qui sont sur la recherche et que le terrain d'action que nous sommes peut aussi être un terrain de recherche. On mène des recherches-actions. On a une cohorte, nous, en matière de santé, ça fait plus de 10 ans qu'on la suit, vous voyez, avec des universités de médecine. Enfin, on a des possibilités de ce type-là. La difficulté, c'est peut-être dans la durée, mais on essaye d'y pallier. Donc, ce cluster cluster social me paraît extrêmement important parce qu'on ne pourra pas faire sans. Et si nos professionnels du travail social ne sont pas formés avec un coup d'avance sur des évolutions qui vont extrêmement vite, forcément, ils arriveront avec du retard, ils seront déconnectés. Et ça crée forcément des tensions au bout d'un moment. Voilà, donc je pense qu'au contraire, comme je dis parfois, il faut qu'on réenchante le social. Pour réenchanter le social, je pense que vous êtes bien placés en tout cas pour être ces activateurs de réenchantement. Et je voulais vraiment adresser mes remerciements au président Robert Bergougnan de la conférence européenne, à Denis Valence, qui est un ex-collègue que je connais bien, président de l'UNAFORIS, et Diane Bossière, voilà, qui a œuvré, en tout cas, qui a beaucoup insisté pour qu'on puisse être présent ici. Merci à tous, en tout cas, et bon courage.
So thank you very much, Mr. Jean-Paul Raymond, for his coming. Thank you for speech and thank you for supporting us in the name of the city of Paris. So, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we are approaching to our last session here, and as you know, this will be the panel discussion between four distinguished speakers, guests, and I use this opportunity to say big thank you to all of them in the beginning of this panel discussion. When we were planning the conference, one of our task was to make the conference as interactive as possible, and I really hope that you had such a conference here during the last 3 days, and also this final round table or panel discussion should be contribution to this goal. So you know who are the guests here, and our work today will look like I will ask the questions initially, 2 questions to each of our guests. They will give their introductory speech or reflection on my questions, and after that, after we finish this our part here, around these tables, let's say, then of course you will be kindly invited to participate with your reflections, with your questions and comments. So let me start, and I will start with Professor Peter Beresford, who is on my left, on your right side. So just a few words about Professor Beresford. He is a professor of citizen participation at the University of Essex, co-chair of Shaping Our Lives, National Disabled Peoples and Service Users Organization and Network, and emeritus professor of social policy at Brunel University, London. He is a long-term user of mental health services and has a long-standing background of involvement in the issues of participation as writer, researcher, activist, and teacher. He is a founding member of Power Us, the European network to advance user involvement in social work education, and his latest book is All Our Welfare Towards Participation Social Policy. So once more, thank you very much, Peter. And let's start with first question I prepared for him. From your study, writings, and your research, as well from your long practical experience on advancing public participation, involvement, and empowerment of long-term users of health and social care, how can you estimate current state of the art of these topics inside the social work curriculum? Maybe if you can say us what are, according to your opinion, main challenges in this field for the educational curriculums of social work in the next decade.
Thank you very much, Nino. Bonjour, mes amis. This is a wonderful platform to be on. It is great to be asked to be part of this closing plenary session, to be with you all here towards the end of a great event in one of the world's most wonderful cities, as we've been hearing. The key words for me from this definitive conference are boundaries, future, and sustainability, and I'd like to begin my response to your helpful question, Nino, by addressing this. First, the future. It must be an inclusive and anti-discriminatory future. In this time, globally, internationally, here and elsewhere in Europe, it is a time of too many divisions, of fault lines and conflicts, ones which some politicians seem committed to make worse. What is key is to build an inclusive, diverse, and anti-discriminatory future. But also, I want to say a universalist future, seeing the bigger contribution that social work can make to all groups, to meet all needs, going beyond traditional narrow understandings of the most disadvantaged and marginalized, and only working with them. I hope we can see a social work for all of us. We all face social and personal issues that recognizes the value that social work can be to everyone. Second, boundaries. To be challenging the boundaries, as Power Us, which I'm proud to be involved with, has highlighted this week, mending gaps and ending gaps. That, of course, includes gaps between different communities, between understanding of our overlapping identities through recognition of intersectionality, gaps keeping some groups disadvantaged in the service system, some excluded from it, particularly from its more valued parts, and of course gaps between us as service providers, service educators, students, and service users. Power Us, I believe, so much has done to help to show us about how we can bridge such gaps. Finally, gaps between us as practitioners, educators, researchers, and managers in social work, gaps that I think can limit the achievement and understanding of social work, its reach and effectiveness. Finally, sustainability. Social work can be crucial to supporting contribution and positive social reproduction, not supporting traditional economistic, narrowly economically based production, which damages our planet, damages its peoples and other species. Instead, social work that's part of supporting sustainability. What sustainability should really mean for social work is helping all of us be the people we can become through emotional and practical support, not supporting, forcing people into work, working in mindless economistic production and growth, but enabling people to contribute to sustainability and the well-being of our planet in positive activities and relationships. safeguarding and securing people's human rights, meeting their needs, maximizing their well-being. So my message is a simple one, and it builds on the collective presence that there has been through this conference. I believe a key liberatory and emancipatory unified presence, the presence of Power Us service users and workers, educators and learners. We are all learners. I'm so proud to be part of this T-shirt presence. Mending the gap, we seek to, yes, and ending the gap. That's my message. And key to this is extending the valuing and role of experiential knowledge, the knowledge we get through our lives in social work. Social work, I think, has been a leader in doing this, involving service users in its educational process, its evaluation, in research and practice, as learners, increasingly valuing shared lived experience in recruits to social work, building on the insights that it can offer, that experience in all its diversity. But there's so much more to do in the next decade. We must include all those voices, those perspectives, that experiential knowledge in the materials, much more in the materials we use for learning. We must involve that knowledge in activities and events more like today. We must be as a we that includes service users, practitioners, students, and educators all together in the process in our overlapping roles, and such overlaps should be more and more encouraged, supported, and I think required. I believe social work's been ahead of other professions in this journey, this movement. There's a load of enthusiasm and experience to build on, a time of great advance, of increasing interest and opportunity. Of course, there are challenges. These include the difficulty of developing and maintaining equal partnerships, but I think Power Us's experience is this can be done, barriers can be overcome. Social work has, I believe, often had poor leadership in some countries, like the UK, in England. The long-standing subverting power of neoliberalism has been at work, but that even in the UK, which is currently under major political challenge, we may see an end to that. There is real hope in Europe and beyond, I think, for the future, and we all here of us can help and make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for this very strong, very deep message. Please remember this, what was said. You will have a lot to say, I'm sure, later on. So now I will turn on my right and introduce Nada. Nada Al-Nashif is currently Assistant Director General for Social and Human Sciences in UNESCO. She graduated in Philosophy, Politics and Economics from Balliol, Oxford University, and she has a Master in Public Policy from the Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University. Prior to joining UNESCO, she served as Assistant Director General, Regional Director of the International Labour Organization's Regional Office for Arab States, based in Beirut, Lebanon. Previously, she worked at UNDP, serving in Libya, Lebanon, Iraq, and at headquarters in New York. As advisor in several boards, including the Birzeit University in Palestine, she is engaged in harmonizing education with the labor market. So, my first question to you, Nada, is, as in the UNESCO's mission statement, it is written that UNESCO is a specialized agency of the United Nations, contributes to the building of peace, the eradication of poverty and sustainable development, and intercultural dialogue through education, the sciences, culture, communication, and information. And one of the 6 main strategic goals of the UNESCO for the period 2014-2021 is related to supporting inclusive social development, fostering intercultural dialogue for the reapproachment of cultures, and promoting ethical principles. This goal is very comparable with the overall goals of the professional social work, to the Agenda 2030, as well as the UNESCO mandate at its strategic goal 6. So how do you see potential contribution of social workers? Do you see any particular aspect that from UNESCO's point of view should be emphasized in the curriculum of social work education in the next period? Sorry.
Thank you very much, and it's a real pleasure to be here, as Peter just said. Thank you to the organizers. Very quickly, the European Association, obviously the French National Union. I think I was very, very honored to be invited to the second International Congress on Social Work 1 year ago in La Rioja, and I'm really flattered to be asked back in this clearly, what is a coalition of the like-minded. On that question, both the strategic goals of UNESCO, but more importantly now, the guiding light is really Agenda 2030 and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. What we have in common is the path-breaking international commitment, which is anchored in human rights, which targets social justice, which includes very much the emphasis on building inclusive and equitable societies, and very much promising to leave no one behind. In its entirety, this agenda, and very much the work of UNESCO across all the sectors, is about transformation that is holistic and action-oriented. I think these three values, it sounds to me, are at the core of your profession and can only be achieved through a meaningful contribution of communities like yours and through partnerships between our communities. What does that mean? First of all, the critical and holistic approach is at the very heart of the evolution, the conceptual basis and the practice of social work. This community, I think, and there are not many like it, recognizes the complexity of social challenge because it seeks to comprehend the root causes, the drivers, the interconnections. The Sustainable Development Goals are underpinned by a very similar logic. The multiple social, economic, environmental issues tackled are deeply interconnected and cumulative. And for the first time, an agenda has been articulated in this spirit. Our policies and solutions, we realize, will not be feasible unless they are as complex, almost, but as multi-pronged as the problems which they seek to solve. We struggle with this all the time, and I think the social work communities, drawing on their long-standing practice and expertise in this translation of the principles, the root causes, into remedies, have a great contribution to make to that mandate, whether it's ours or that underlying mandate of the Agenda 2030. Social work at its core is a transformative discipline, not just the provision of services to improve lives or enhance welfare, but empowerment. This is what we're talking about now. For people to get a hold of their lives, change the rules of the game, and challenge the context, perhaps. This is, again, a unique worldview and orientation that we must have in common, delivering on the ground for those people whom we have previously perhaps not included. And this allows also for a robust convergence between our communities. Perhaps most critically is the inherent concern of social work with delivery and on-the-ground impact. This discipline has the knowledge, it has many tools, and it has mechanisms for an effective operationalization and delivery of this mandate. A great concern of Agenda 2030 is to make the link between international commitments and national policy and legal frameworks, and then practice. In addition to the role of bringing upstream policy to downstream action, the social work community has also an important role in feeding back the monitoring, the decision-making systems, the data and the knowledge which is required to understand, to accompany, to assess, to adapt in order to make real impact and to have effectiveness on the ground. And in this regard, what I'm saying is that the task and the contribution of your community is helping us, I hope, to bridge two essential gaps between action, on the one hand, at different levels, the integrated approach for the first time, and the other between commitments and, importantly, practice. And on the second issue of social work and education, as your conference clearly acknowledges, this is at the heart, of course, of how social work will go forward. And I think there's three things that perhaps curricula could do with more emphasis on. First, we've just heard about human rights fighting and preventing discrimination, racism, and exclusion. This is a responsibility that is echoed in the critical mandate of all the UN systems in the context of the body of international norms and standards which are being challenged, as we also just heard, and I think we continue. It's the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, the rights of persons with disabilities. The task is to close two gaps between international standard and national legislation, and then national law and practice. And therefore, it's necessary to instill the values of human rights, not just in the content, but in education as a whole, including the teaching methodology, the setting in which social work is provided, and the design of appropriate, in structure, in process, and outcome, indicators to evaluate the practice. The value of investing in promoting knowledge of human rights is evidenced by how much research has been conducted over the years, and also by the progressive emergence of specific degree programs focused precisely on social work and human rights. Social interventions are characterized by their deep multidimensionality. We're talking about psychology, sociology, politics, criminology, economics, ecology, education, health, counseling, many more. Designing an adequate curriculum that takes on board this range of domains is very complex. And this complexity, I think, requires strengthening the evidence base, and we need to come together to bridge those gaps. I think we have been too often in many silos that do not, I think, emphasize enough the need to bridge the divisions in finding really smart solutions to the problems that we face. And finally, we talk about intercultural dialogue very strongly at UNESCO. This is at the heart of the daily life of social workers, but must be reflected better in education curricula. Social workers and students act as envoys between cultures, which means that they understand worldviews. They seek the integration of different perspectives that may appear to be in conflict. Definitely, one can be influenced, but perhaps not determined by cultural value, and this applies to both the social workers and the service users, and we could do with a lot more of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Nada. By the way, on my own language, Nada means hope, so you open the hope now, and agenda opens the hope. Okay, let's go with Staffan. Staffan Höjer is professor in social work at the Department of Social Work, University of Gothenburg, Sweden. His research is mostly about knowledge, professionalization, and organization in social work. Among other things, he has studied the processes of academization, the content of social work research, the privatization in social work, and the decision-making within child protection. Staffan Höjer is involved in many international projects and has been a supervisor for PhDs in social work in Uganda and Rwanda. So my first question to Staffan would be, the question of academization of the social work in the European as well as in global context is still rather far from being satisfactory. What are, according to your research and insights, main historical and recent obstacles, and what could be main incentives for speeding up of this process or processes?
Thank you for the question, and hi everyone. And I'm really honored to be here. Thank you, organizers, and well, everyone. It's been a great conference, hasn't it? Yeah, really. Now to the question. I like this question because it has interested me since I started social work education in 1973, you know, long way back. And on that first day, I sat in a room like this, and I asked some of the teachers up here, because, do you have any questions, they said. I said, how come we don't have research in social work? They became kind of silent and at first, but then said, well, we hope to get it. Well, now, that was a long time ago. Today, in Sweden, we have PhD education in 12 universities where social workers have written more than 350 PhDs in social work. So something has happened. And you asked me to talk about academization, and that can be defined as a process where academics and academic knowledge is being ascribed increased importance and growing influence in the professional group and in society as a whole. And in your question, you say it's not really satisfactory today in social work in Europe, and we should have more of it. And I do agree. Academization is one of the pillars of professionalization. You can go back to any scientist from the profession, from the sociology of the professions, and they have all these lists to determine what signifies a profession. And number one on every list is to have a profession with its own knowledge base to build its activities on science and research. So more academization in social work would mean a lot for the status of social work. So yes, we can have more of it. But we've known that since a long time. And so how come it's so difficult to get it then in so many countries? Together with a colleague of mine, Peter Delgran, we have made research on these and in many countries, and we found 4 obstacles to have more of academic. They can be obstacles, but they can also be ways ahead to get more of the academization of social work. The first one is the government or governmental bodies in your country. In the case of Sweden, the government in the 70s, after I started, wanted to improve the welfare professions, and one way of doing so was to enhance the professional status of social work. In other countries, it's not like that. In many of the socialistic countries, such as China and Cuba and many others, social work was stopped at the universities. You didn't have any development of this. But as many of you, I'm sure you know, for instance, in China, in the middle of the 90s, the ruling party and the government and the ruling party decided to give social work more of a professional status. They even decided to, by 2020, have 1.4 million educated social workers in that country. So government is important, not only in China. The second one that is important is the social work profession itself. Because not in every country social work organizations have been for this development. For instance, in Denmark, in many years, representatives of social work profession feared that more academization would take away social workers' link with the service users, and that they would be more obsessed with their own professional development and status than working for change in society. So the social work unions, the social work organizations are the second actor we need to look out for. The third actor that can prevent or help you with your academization are the interest in the universities and the placement of social work education in the universities. In many countries, there are different forms of universities. You know, you have the professional colleges on the one side and the universities on the other, and there is a clear status hierarchy between them. And only in the universities, very often, that's where you can get the PhD education. And do social work schools want to be part of this? Or are they even allowed? The same thing happens with nurses, with teachers, with other professional organizations, whether they are allowed to get into the university system or not. So, but the strive for professionalization in many countries have opened up these doors, sometimes by having changes from the university and the government system allowing PhD education and other forms of academization. This is just one form, but it's kind of interesting to look at that specific part of the academization. And in other cases, such as Sweden, the social work schools were moved into universities, which open up for this. So the third was the universities. The fourth one that we found in many countries are resistance from other disciplines inside the university, very often sociology. I hear some laughs. Well, I've been to many conferences here, both in France and in other countries, where I've heard sociologists say, well, you know, well, no, I'm not going to be. Social work is nothing else but applied sociology. So there is no need to create another academic discipline such as social work. Let us do the thinking, you can do the doing. Well, this factor needs to be handled in all the countries in order to open up for this. But things are happening quite quickly. I mean, well, at least for me that have some age, I think it's not so long ago since year 2000 when François Lao from this country made an inquiry in Europe to count the number of countries where where it was possible to have a PhD in social work, and there were very few at the time, and things have changed. So we can learn from what is happening in other countries, but we must be prepared still for difficult times, because science and academization has, at least up to recently, scored very high in society as a whole in most of the European countries. But now we have voices that tell us that resources to universities are being cut. So we must be better in showing how the academization of social work will improve welfare provisions for society and its members. Why a country with many educated social workers and with a strong social work research base is better off than one without it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Staffan. I'm sure that somebody will hear you and us after this conference. Okay, and in this first round, my last question will be for the Gorana Panic. Gorana is the doctoral student at the University of Jyväskylä, Finland. Yeah, Jyväskylä. Yeah, she completed her studies in social work at the University of Banja Luka, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Her doctoral study, Action Research, explores experiences of social workers' trajectories after graduation. She worked as a teaching assistant in social work at the University of Banja Luka. Her main interests are in critical social work, eco-social work, social movements, and critical pedagogy. She is also interested in combining academic research with activism. Recently, as a doctoral student, she became a board member of the European Social Work Research Association. So, Gorana, my first question to you is, your research interest relates to the experiences of social work graduates in a transition from higher education to work. What are the main features of this process from your insights? What are possible scenarios for the working places of social workers in the era of neoliberalism? And are there any particular messages for the social work educators to make this transition easier? Thank you.
Okay, I think I'll stay here. I don't feel so courageous to go over there. It's better to be surrounded with these people. Thank you, Nino, for your invitation. And I'm happy to be here to broaden up European perspective with a view from Europe's semi-periphery, from Bosnia, which is geographically southeast Europe, but it's not part of EU, and we are not doing so well like Switzerland. I have an interesting piece of social work research to share with this education community, which corresponds well with the conference main theme, especially part of challenging boundaries, including challenging boundaries of social work education itself. There are two issues I want to share with you from my doctoral research. One is that graduated social workers in part of the country where I conducted study, although phenomenon is probably present across the country, Balkan region, and post-socialist countries, are that they are faced with limited and unequal opportunities to enter social work profession, especially paid job positions in social work. There's a lot of like unpaid social work. So Little Richard's famous single keep on knocking, but you can't come in. I think that really captures well the problem I was researching. And while some European countries are faced with a shortage of qualified social workers, and leaving social work profession due to high burnout and stress and deteriorating working conditions, like UK or Sweden, some other countries. In Bosnia, graduates are leaving profession before they even enter it. Not only because of limits of existing labor structures, but also because of low status of social work profession in my country or in that region. So after 1 or 2 years spent in seeking for job opportunities, those with social work degree are turning away from social work, pressured and pushed to all sorts of precarious jobs outside of social work profession and under university qualification. I came across that my former social work students are working at the bakeries, they are salespersons, they are working for the bank, so they are babysitting and taking any kind of job that is, they can find actually. And despite this is the second thing I want to share, and you may or may not relate with this, but despite this reality and along sharing common circumstances in terms of graduated social workers post-graduation trajectories, I found a lot of evidence about individual efforts, yet disconnected fights to solve these issues, but little evidence of individual acts of resistance and no collective action at all to tackling given situation. In terms of imagined alternatives and possibilities of acting together, graduate social workers mainly suggested various strategies of self-reliance, but no self-organizations towards structures that are producing and maintaining this given situation. Therefore, we need, as social work educators and social work researchers, we need to make sure that social work students and graduates are informed, engaged, and ready to act together to address private troubles as public issue. And as Henry Giroux said, politics takes many forms, but central to it is the need for citizens to be able to translate individuals' problems into public concerns. So this is what I came across with my study, that they were dealing with the situation as a private trouble, but not addressing it as a public issue. So this is the concern for social work education as well. So I was asked also about what are the possible scenarios for the working places of social workers in the era of neoliberalism. And I think that question needs to be answered by each school of social work and the European Association of Schools of Social Work in alliance with the International Federation of Social Workers. And that answer goes beyond what is next workplace in social work. And the question is, what is next in social work? What is our vision of social work? So that is not just labor market issue, and it's professional issue as well. And that goes beyond our satisfaction with growing number of new schools, enrolled students and graduates. Social work schools should be also concerned where and how newly gained social work knowledge gets into action, serving not just individual careers, but wider social purpose of social work, that is commitment to societal change. And moreover, it is important to answer the question, since the International Association of Schools of Social Work 2010 census reported on dramatic growth in social work education in the last 10 years across the globe. So growth of social work education does not mean automatically that social work profession is flourishing. What is flourishing is institutions of social work education. 1 minute more, okay. So in terms of these, what are the job possibilities? At least in Bosnia, we can expect further local and international NGOization and privatization of social services. In relation to Europe, we might expect mobility of social work workforce from the European periphery to UK, to Sweden and Germany. Also, we heard a lot that future of social work is in private sector, in entrepreneurship, but of course, neither of these are really questioning neoliberalism, and these are scenarios that are contributing to the further accommodation of social work to the neoliberalism. So is there an alternative to that? Yes, the alternative is in politicization of social work, in our mobilization and self-organizing as social work educators together with students, practitioners, professional associations, service users. In countries with stronger civic society, this is even more probable. Some messages for schools of social work, maybe I have like 3 really practical things that social work schools could develop follow-up studies of their newly graduate social workers, looking their career paths, present trends. Schools could serve as a bridge between students and local communities, jointly working on identification of new emerging needs with communities, promoting and advocating for new fields of social work engagement. Also serving as a bridge between schools and national associations, so newly graduated social workers could strengthen their professional identity instead of identifying themselves primarily as unemployed. So the question is like, how can graduates put into action their newly gained social work knowledge? So instead of emphasizing connection between labor market and education, and basically I'm trying to avoid this market-driven education, I would rather turn to professional associations of social work, our communities, and citizens and service users associations to try to regain or gain more recognition for social work from below.
Thank you very much, Gorana. Just want to add that some parts of Europe are more complicated than some other parts. So the countries where we are from are much more complicated, and people usually hate the politics, and how to make them to feel in love with politics, this will be the challenge. Okay, so let's go now to the second round of questions. It will be shorter, without introduction. So, Peter, among some of the main challenges of the current societies are the issues about social inclusion, participation, and social exclusion. Who are the main actors of these processes in the society, and how do you see the roles of the social work academics, namely how they could contribute to the process of reduction of exclusion, especially of the most affected parts of the population?
Thanks very much for that, Nino. I must first of all refer to the terrific insights I think that Gorana has just given us, which I hope I can connect with in what I've got to say. Clearly, issues of participation and inclusion are ultimately structural issues which demand a progressive, inclusive, and truly democratic politics. That was at the heart also of what she said, far from the neoliberalism that continues to scar many, many societies. But I think we must also look much closer to home for key actors who can help take a lead in challenging the exclusions we see, both that create the need for social work and can affect its capacity, and that came from what you were saying, to address such exclusions and inequalities. And here I think I should focus to some extent on social work's own organisations for a moment and the part they can play and do play to advance inclusion, particularly, of course, for me, to support the involvement of people as service users with service user experience. Power Us and my own service user-led organisation, Shaping Our Lives, please do Google us, have been proud to be involved with the European Association of Schools for Social Work, EAssw as I call it, in this and other events and activities it's undertaken. I feel it's risen, of course there's so much always you can do, it's risen, tried to rise to the challenge of user involvement. There is more to do, but that's something to be proud of. And I, as a service user from a service user-led organisation, was, of course, and I'm proud of this, invited to be part of this plenary. We hope that we can work for many more collaborations and partnerships, extending the involvement and inclusion of service users and our organisations, But maybe a little sadly, it seems to be, from my experience at least, from our experience, a very different story with the International Federation of Social Workers. I need to say that for more than 10 years, Shaping Our Lives and other service users have sought to help them advance the move on from the lack of user involvement in their organization and activities. There have been repeated promises from their leadership. We managed, Shaping Our Lives, to send people several years ago to their conference in Stockholm, and those promises were then repeated. We raised money to send a disabled woman and her assistant to their event in Australia, and again the same was promised and nothing happened. And then there was the ill-judged idea of having the conference last year in South Korea, which has a terrible track record with regard to the rights of disabled people, and that was not addressed. And at the conference, when disabled people were forced to make a public protest, they were dragged off the stage. That must be a marker. That must never be repeated. The IFSW leadership promised then to discuss ways forward with us as service users with Shaping Our Lives. We have repeatedly asked them for such a meeting, and then the nearest we've got was to receive a suggestion at the last minute to meet with them yesterday, a year later. This is not good enough. It is excluding. It is inconsistent with the participatory rhetoric of that organization. It must change. How can an organization, as this one does, talk about empowering service users and persistently exclude them effectively from its own activities? How can it be a credible representative for practitioners seeking to support empowerment when it does this? When will current practitioners be in a stronger position to influence it? When will service users? It must address these issues with real urgency, as it suggested it would after South Korea. If social work is to be about inclusion, then its organizations must reflect this. It has to start at the top. IFSW must change to meet these challenges. It must become a champion of diversity and real inclusion. But this, of course, is only part of the story. There are such terrible pressures in our societies to exclusion. We have seen the crude, negative politicization of issues like immigration, anti-Muslimism, and other forms of intolerance, prejudice, discrimination, and exclusion, from mentalism and disablism to sexism, to heterosexism, anti-poor people, health and welfare reforms which have been cruel and heartless, embodied internationally as policy. We must build bridges, as we have heard from Power Us and others, here with the commitment to mend and end the gaps between us. We must also remember our own responsibilities. We have to be our own leaders. We need, as we've been hearing, grassroots leadership to achieve bottom-up change. It is perhaps unlikely, as is always the case, to come from the top. Academics, educators are in a particularly positive position to support the opportunities of service users, students and practitioners, current practitioners, to be part of the discussion and development of social work. And we need to include the wide diversity of service users, students and practitioners too, as Shaping Our Lives found in our study, which you can find on our website, Beyond the Usual Suspects. I've referred to social work practitioners, those working now directly with service users' clients. I hope we can give priority to making it more possible internationally for such practitioners to stay much longer in face-to-face practice, as they may also, we've heard how difficult it is even maybe to get into it, as they may also become managers, researchers and educators. For social work to signify in this way itself, its own valuing of practice within the structures of the profession, and also to be including the lived experience of practitioners, the practice, knowledge, wisdom, and of family carers and service users, and for events like this to do all they can to be inclusive of practitioners, students, and service users. In the UK, we have been undertaking lately a terrible crash course in seeing and learning about the meaning and consequences of neoliberalism, of exclusion and marginalisation. For example, as you've heard, with the terrible Grenfell Tower fire in London, which has killed and brought suffering to so many people. Social work has such an important part to play in preventing and challenging such exclusion, and also in supporting those oppressed by it. As this conference highlights, we must all get ourselves into the strongest position collectively to take on that task. And I think the best way we do that is by our own efforts for inclusion, building alliances between our different roles, our different standpoints, our different organizations, our different experiences, and valuing all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, again. Very, very strong words, I repeat. Yes, it will be recorded. My second question for Nada is, will you sit here or will you go? Okay. Among other aspects of the UNESCO's work, the questions related to the social integration, migration, and sustainable development deserve special attention. What are the main challenges in this field for the UNESCO, and are there space for the joint projects with the schools of social work in Europe? How social work educators can connect with your efforts? Is there a space for establishing of new UNESCO chairs at the social work schools, and what are the preconditions for this?
Thanks very much, Nino. Two main challenges in these areas, as many others of UNESCO endeavor. Very quickly, one internal, one external. I spoke about the complexity of the phenomena that we deal with, and this, of course, is very much about migration, sustainable development, we just heard. These are transdisciplinary, they're interconnected, and they are multi-level. We have been used previously to very narrow interventions that come within single disciplines, and our work methods very simply have to change. I've just come from a meeting on the ethics of climate change, where we had to explain this is not just a natural science issue. It is an issue that brings together not just the ethicists, but people working on desertification, on legal aspects, geographers, historians. And I think this is a very different kind of work that I think we have to understand. The engagement with partners, as partners, not beneficiaries at the end of the line, is also something completely different. And I think we need to be more agile and more responsive across all the disciplines. The second challenge is the external one, a very rapidly changing environment of international cooperation and development. You just heard how it can lead us down a very slippery slope. The Agenda 2030 is ambitious and it's complex, but it requires a very different kind of setting. And we have two important contexts now. One, a new Secretary General at the United Nations who is putting an emphasis on prevention, and I think social work is an important part of that. It hasn't really been elaborated. But this notion of not waiting for disaster to happen and then working on the humanitarian response, which is futile, as we can tell from the scale of humanitarian crises these days, but also the increasing challenge to multilateralism, the pushback on rights across the world, the emergence of populism, and policies which, instead of being really anchored in rights, as this agenda is supposed to be, look at it from the prism of security and of sovereignty. And we get to very different places at the social level, the community level, the individual, but certainly the intergovernmental level, which is where we have to work. All of these, I think, threaten our core commitments, as I imagine they threaten yours. As for close collaboration, I said before, it's necessary. I think this social work community is critical across the world in delivering on the promise of the Sustainable Development Goals. I think our work, our priorities converge ethically and in principle, but also operationally. Three quick examples of entry points, potentially, where we can do more. We run, for example, a management of social transformation program where we try to enshrine more inclusive and more participatory evidence-based policy making. We mentioned before, this is an important part of how we can ensure that we close the loop to reinforce capacity. But bringing together scientific communities, policymakers, practitioners for a stronger research policy interface. We had a session here earlier today, my colleague Julia is here, on the Inclusive Policy Lab, emerging issues of knowledge crowdsourcing and how we can turn those into inclusive and equitable policies. We have a global online platform, and I think this notion of, again, working to ensure that we have critical mass of information, documented, collated, spreading the know-how, making sure the data is delivered, and the practice-derived experience coming from social work, and especially doctoral work, I think, which is at the cutting edge, which is very, very important. We also have many, many collaborations, I think, where we could welcome more of you. For example, the comparative research program on poverty from Norway. We're hosting a workshop next week, actually 6 and 7 July, on politics of inclusion. I think all of these areas can do with a different perspective. A second entry point, very quickly speaking to the migration and combating racism, is our International Coalition of Inclusive and Sustainable Cities. This is a platform of more than 500 cities across the world, run by regional and national coalitions. Commitments by city authorities form a core of a broad array of interventions, upholding sport values, understanding how we monitor racism, looking at access to housing and employment, education on tolerance, and the promotion of cultural diversity. Collecting the evidence-based best practices, understanding success stories. We've just produced a toolkit for equality, working with the European Training and Research Center for Human Rights and Democracy at GRAS. And this, I think, lends itself to better interpretation, a different kind of interpretation perhaps, through social work chapters. I want to say I'm using the European chapter, but this is just one of many, and it will be interesting to look at how social work in Europe is supporting the development of social work in other parts of the world where there are, I don't want to say greater needs, but different kinds of needs, perhaps. This is a preoccupation. Agenda 2030 is not about the North helping the South. It is about all of us working together. It is a universal agenda, and I think this part of what we can do together is very important. Perhaps I can just say, also in the area of intercultural dialogue, intercultural competencies, along with the basic human dignity, which we believe are the prerequisites of all dialogue. We work closely with our chairs, with international expertise, to look at the concepts underlying dialogue. And social workers are among the key target groups of such tools, where we could certainly open it up and explore a little bit better what specific collaboration could look like. On the establishment of UNESCO chairs within social work schools, there is definitely much space. I think we would welcome the addition to this nexus of moving from research to practice and back again. And I think that we have very clear guidelines, we have processes that we would love to consider, but I think that all of these constitute an agenda for the future that we would love to engage in more.
My second question to Staffan, what is your thinking about the professional identities of social workers in the Europe today? And what are the possible main groups of factors that should be taken in account inside the social work education in building of professional identities in the future?
Thank you for the question again. I've made some studies on professional identity, comparing it in different studies. For instance, with Liz Frost from Bristol, who is here, and Anna Maria Campanini from Italy, Milan, who is also here. And yes, I think this is the right place to discuss and perhaps worry about social workers' professional identity. As we all know, discussions about professional identity can be found in all professions, not only social work. And it's normally defined as the individual's identification with a certain professional group. And normally the professional education, all of you, is the most important actor for the individual socialization process into a specific work or a profession. And some people say that the social work training is the period where a certain unique professional worldview is created and value that will follow the student in her work life. It is not only about creating skills and knowledge and values, but something even more fundamental, a professional identity. Some even call it taking on a professional persona. So, yes, I do think it's important that we from time to time discuss what kind of professional identity we all are creating among our students. How are we preparing them? Do we make them feel proud to be social workers or just insecure? And what about the professional identity in the future? We do have some challenges. The professional identity is definitely linked to the development in society. It's not something constant, and we must think of how to prepare the students for this. Should we prepare them just to follow in the society's changes, or should we prepare them to resist and fight against unwelcome changes into the society? One example that has been given several times from this point is the change in societies with more managerialism, more new public management that has meant a transformation of public systems into a managerial logic, borrowed from private corporations with market mechanisms as governance systems. It means introduction of procurements, general agreements, privatization, economic incentives, and audits, among other things. There are many researchers and others that have shown that these systems are getting a great influence in how professionals are working, and they have proven that professionals rather become victims of the systems rather than independent actors with professional discretion. More and more time is spent with documentation, following manuals, administration, less time with service users, and to promote change. So, how is this affecting then the identity of our students, and how can we support them? Well, one answer is, of course, to build knowledge, skills, and values with the ethical discussions we've heard about here on how to best develop a reflective practice, and let us strengthen the profession with the help of service users organizations, as well as from science and research, in order to prepare the professionals with more knowledge and to make them more proud of what they are and how they should act. But you may then say, what then happens when they get out there, move into practice in these NPM new systems? Will they leave social work? Perhaps they will. At least that part of work that is not organized in the way to make social workers believe appropriate social work is possible. We have seen this, for instance, in child protection in England and in Sweden. However, it doesn't have to mean they leave social work as such. One of my former PhD students, Karin Kullberg from Sweden, did her study on social work careers in our country and followed a cohort of social work students for over 20 years in practice. And yes, many left their jobs in the social services, but normally they did not leave social work. After 20 years, more than 80% of the former social work students were still in what they called a social work job. And the crisis I mentioned in child protection has, in this instant in Sweden, led to the introduction of new resources and programs, and hopefully, the work will develop in a way that social workers may want to stay in. I think we need some good signs, so I will also mention another good signs that we can see from social workers. In Sweden, there was a big call for supervision for many years. And today, if a municipality starts a social work place with no supervisions, they will not get any applicants for that job. So almost all social workers in social services do have supervision today. But we all know that social work in Sweden and in Europe are full of challenges, and that this also challenge the way the professional identities are built. And we've heard, I was going to give you a long list, but we've been talking about this quite a lot during this conference. So lastly, let me end on a more positive note. I've seen young social workers in Sweden mobilizing activities such as Vi står inte ut, which is translated to we can't stand it anymore, we can't take it anymore. in Sweden, using social work values to defend the rights of young migrants. And to me, that sounds like social work education must have been able to build a good professional identity. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Staffan. And now, one big jump from north to the south. Very last question. Gorana, since you grew up in time of war, in a post-socialist and post-conflict transition country where you later finished your undergraduate education, what is your thinking about the European social work educational space? Is there something like this, or the differences are too big to speak about harmonization of the social work education in Europe?
Social work education in Europe operates within diverse historical, political, and professional context. And therefore, harmonization needs to be discussed, I think, in relation to already existing diversity and further diversification in order for social work education to respond to local and global phenomena or challenges. And there are mechanisms of harmonization that are already in place. And so in that sense, there is a European social work educational space because the Bologna reform promoted recognition of professional qualifications across national borders in order to facilitate the mobility of labor. But let's keep in mind also that employability is high on Bologna agenda. In that sense, social work education is primarily seen as generating of social work workforce. Furthermore, there's interest also to harmonize not only degree structure, but also curriculum. And this is where I have reservations towards the harmonization. For instance, Bosnia and Herzegovina, after the war in 1995, started establishing new schools of social work under the impact of international actors embracing psychosocial approaches in social work over social and community development. For example, we didn't receive training in community organizing, structural, anti-oppressive, and critical approaches. I mean, of course, we had these in curriculum. We studied them as a part of social work theories, but we really are not trained. This is not the main paradigm or approach that we are trained. And if you're thinking like that's the post-conflict and post-social country in transition, but still you get this very individualistic or individual-centered psychosocial approach instead of, I think, social and community development approach. And so I'm thinking then whether harmonization of curriculum leave enough space for diversity as well, and how harmonization would contribute to sustainability that we are, it's another like a buzzword, as transition is another buzzword. And so then, besides that, the main aim of harmonization of higher education, is the main aim of harmonization. Sorry, I lost the track. What did I? Yeah, no, I wanted to say like whether the main aim of harmonization then would be to kind of contribute to higher employability and mobility of social work workforce across the Europe, or is it harmonization supposed to be action-oriented towards reimagining and social work and politicizing social work education? So that's kind of my reservation. And then also like coming from the post-conflict and society in transition, I really, my hair kind of gets up when I hear the word transition, because it's usually associated with something like something progressive, like moving to something better, but actually in post-socialist countries, we saw that transition, it can be also rather regressive. You can lose a lot, like we lost our free education, we lost our free health healthcare that we had in socialist time, and also transition can mean that you are caught in the transition loop, where you're really not moving forward, you're just like looping there. So I think transition itself is kind of very, it's a linear concept. It's also, in terms of this transition also from higher education to work, it means like that eventually you will transit to that destination, but you may not, like as I explained in the first place. So these are my kind of reservations.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with this we finalized this first part. I hope you have energy and time still, and we'll use your space now to reflect, to comment, and to ask our distinguished and very, very interesting, at least for me, guests and introductory speeches. So, floor is yours now.
Staffan, it was your comment about you presented 4 barriers to the academization of social work. And I was particularly interested in what you called a barrier, the second barrier, the risk of increasing the gap between professionals and people who use services. So I suppose I wanted to hear, and also what was missing for me was your case for academization. Why is it a good thing? And I'd like you to answer that within the context of the risk of damage it may do to service users.
What I wanted to describe first by this was the part of schizophrenic attitude towards professionalization from the discipline itself. It is very self-conscious along these terms. And I am not as worried. I think social work as a discipline with its good values, its good definitions, will, when it increases its status with the help of academic knowledge, it will be a stronger voice also for the social service users and the people, the vulnerable people in the society. So I don't see that, and my case for academization is to strengthen the profession and this fight for mending gaps for, as Peter has been talking quite a lot of. I don't see that risk.
And I think we are a little bit between the devil and the deep blue sea, because what we've been seeing with new approaches to social work education in England, for example, is a determined effort to get social work education out of colleges, academia, universities. But the purpose has been so that it can be controlled by central government committed to a neoliberal agenda, located in authorities, in councils, in organizations, local state organizations, probably, but not necessarily, which are themselves committed to a neoliberal agenda where all the kinds of enlightenment that may be available within the critical discussions that take place in academia are denied, and where the student is encouraged simply to do what they're told by the state, the local state, and the organization. But of course, there is no doubt that academia has many, many defects and deficiencies of its own. I mean, it does tend to remove people from wider understandings and a broader range, a more diverse range of experiential knowledge. So what we've got to be talking about here is a renewed vision of the school, of academe, which is one which is inclusive, which is outward-facing, which is not elitist, which really pays attention to diversity, which brings all that's possible in terms of a kind of collective intellectual activity, rather than one that's privileged and hierarchical. But the problem is, of course, and social work's a victim of this, that a lot of our universities in the UK are all those terrible things. We've just had this exercise in Britain, which we haven't had before, which is a neoliberal exercise, but it's about rating the teaching that students have got. And what's been really exciting for people like me is to see some of those bastions of privilege and neoliberalism, like the London School of Economics, getting the lowest grade. which has been so thrilling, because normally they will be seen as which number in the top 20 of the world are they positioned in. So I think this is a very complicated route, and we are at risk either way round, and it needs much more bottom-up engagement, I think.
I don't think it's uncomplicated, of course not. But I agree fully with the risk of deprofessionalization, making social work a more dependent profession than it is right now. I think that strengthening the academic status can be a good way of strengthening the independence of the profession. However, with this said, of course, there are always tensions when it comes to social work knowledge and the claims of knowledge that you have. Social work cannot only get caught in academia. Social work researchers can never only be best in class at the universities, because they need to have this dual legitimacy in order to function as something else than other universities have done, other disciplines have done before. So there is always these tensions between knowledge claims from outside the academia and from inside. And as you talked about the devil in the blue sea, I mean, that's the kind of gap that you have to balance when you get into these activities, I think.
My name is Simona Carvaniaris. I'm from Utrecht. And I have a question for Peter as well. Because you were talking also just now, mentioned the word bottom-up engagement and also sustainability of the profession. And I am thinking more from a philosophical way, and was thinking about the frailty approach opposed to the capability approach, which I actually hear in every story of yours. I'm wondering, are we not too ambitious about about the possibilities?
If we cannot give people to come both some hope and some reason for hope, then what are we going to do except curl up and die? And the lesson I have learned as a service user, because I've been so lucky that something awful happened to me, as it felt at the time, and I entered a whole range of awful experiences. I was so lucky I had some sorts of support, including, I should say, some wonderful professional support. But having those terrible things happen to you, where would I have been without being able, having that wonderful chance to learn from and meet with people with other sorts of shared experience, and the hope and the possibility that came from that. And I think that I want to talk not about whether we should hope, or be being too hopeful, but where I feel hope lies. And a colleague of mine who is based in Berlin is doing a wonderful PhD, which sounds exciting in the same way as your research has been exciting, about mental health service users' own accounts of madness, by which she means not how they have been unable to get beyond the standard biomedical models of mental illness, but they've had that chance, like I've had, to think about their experience, perhaps with other people around them, in a much more critical way, in a way that starts from the experience, not from outside imposed models. And that's where I think the hope for social work, and I think the hope more generally lies. And it's what the new social movements of the last quarter of the 20th century are about, the most exciting modern political developments, which is being able to reassess ourselves individually and collectively, and challenge the way that we have been made to see ourselves or be seen by those who have dominated us and those who have set the norms. And that's something that's really so wonderful that we are in a world and an age of. So in the UK, we are going through this unbelievable time at the moment, where the two are in direct collision, where we've had a terrible politics of neoliberalism that literally has killed people or driven them to kill themselves with welfare reform, the people we are talking about here, but an election that has led to the high visibility and likelihood of future success for someone who simply has held to the old truths of our welfare state. And that collision and the sense that he has engendered of the possibility, particularly for younger people, to be listened to, where he's able to say, this man who's old himself, when he's asked a clever question, because he's had millions of young people vote for him and cheer for him, I've got youth on my side. This is so exciting. And it comes from years of neoliberal horror. So of course we have to have hope, and of course we've reason to have hope. And if social work hasn't got hope, what hope is there for the people that social work works with?
We were born in the Department of Sociology, and now we are suffering a lot. They don't want to give us place enough to grow. So it's exactly the goal, my goal, to come to this conference, to power more, to take more power, to go back and start another discussion between us, social workers and sociologists. And I'm looking for arguments, powerful arguments, why it is not only applicable sociology, but this is much more. Thank you in advance.
Yes, I'm Teresa Bertotti from Milano, Italy. I have a question for Nadia Al-Nashif that I thanks for the overall inspiring talk, but I wanted to put in relation to what Staffan Höjer has presented. I have just a question and a wish, and it's related about the resources that have been invested in the development of knowledge and research at the European level. And what I would like to know, if the UNESCO or somebody else have joined the community of scholars that have asked to increase the resources that are invested in research and university, because just to have an example about the program of Horizon 2020 that I think everybody of you knows, the majority of the resources have been put on hard science. So the humanities have really lost a lot of resources. So I think that we need to put together, and so I think UNESCO has a great role to play, and we are an European association, so I would strongly wish that we unify our forces to ask that the number of resources that is dedicated to human science and human stuff are increased, because our science is not enough for our society. And so I would like to know what is the policies in this sense. Thank you.
Was introduced, sociology had its own fights with themselves, so they didn't watch up. No, but and a few of the sociologists thought that worked a lot with social problems and social in these lines that we work in, they thought it was a good idea that this was created, and they actually became our first professors in the discipline of social work. And if you look at, because of course we need sociology, of course we need sociological knowledge. I read all the first 89 PhDs in Sweden and checked what kind of dominant theories they used, and 3/4 of them used theories stemming from sociology. So sociology is important, but it's the creation of the own disciplines that is very important for us in social work to try to get, because that also will mean different things for us. But how to do it, you will probably know it better.
Thank you very much for the question. Of course, we agree that there are not enough resources invested, absolutely, in research. This is a constant talking point in my conversations with ministers, with institutions of research across the world. We are actually just putting together now the final touches on the World Humanities Conference, which is coming together for the first time ever, chaired by UNESCO with the University of Liège, and it's taking place the week of I'll do a little advertisement here, 6 to 12 August in Belgium. For the first time ever, we are trying to actually focus on the huge deficit, not even in the social sciences, but in the humanities, quite often at the expense, the social sciences at the expense of the humanities, but out of a very strong conviction that we are not getting our fair share of attention as problem-solving tools, as thinking, as disciplines, simply to be available. The notion, we're going to have about 1,500 people, 70 seminars, meeting across the spectrum to discuss what are the possible options and how we can move the humanities agenda forward. Much of it is, of course, through the collaboration with the social sciences. So the major regional collaborations is actually through Codestria, Flaxo, Claxo in South America. We're looking at, in Asia, the key hubs, countries like China, which are growing their social sciences in investment. But very few, of course, are in this thing. So, and we have been part of the Horizon 2020 initiative, trying to work with the European Commission to increase support to many initiatives, and we'd be happy to think about stronger partnerships to do exactly that. So absolutely, we have a voice, and if you have any ideas how we can have a stronger voice, we're very happy to do it. But it's a point of advocacy across the board.
Just want to thanks to all of contributors. It was more than excellent for me. We will continue immediately after the closing of this roundtable with very short closing ceremonies. So kindly ask you, if you don't have any urgent situation outside, please stay here, and we will make this, and we will put the dot on the I, and so finalize the conference. So I really want to say thank you to all the today's panelists in the name of the UNAFORIS and in the name of the European Association of Schools of Social Work. This was brilliant, I think very needed and very useful for all of us. Thanks a lot.